Wow. The Furious, just wow. This deserves more than just an opinion video. It requires a post-mortem. How did it succeed where Western cinema continues to fail? Miao and Kenji Tanigaki have delivered something that belongs in the rare, hallowed pantheon of action cinema. You know, films that don't just respect your intelligence but actually understand human physiology. We have been conditioned by modern Hollywood to accept action as a bloodless, frictionless sequence of events. Immortal superheroes punch each other through digital skyscrapers without ever losing their breath, destroying stakes before the fight even begins. But the Furious operates on an older, truer philosophy. Action is character, and character is expressed through exhaustion. When a character gets tired, the narrative changes. The choreography evolves from a display of technical dominance into a desperate scramble for survival. To understand why a mid-budget Eastern production can evoke a visceral reaction that a $250 million American blockbuster could only dream of, we have to trace the history of how Hollywood tried to clone magic, only to end up bankrupting the genre's soul. There was a brief window where Hollywood almost got it right. The late 1990s, the Hong Kong wave crashing over Western cinema. John Woo brought his operatic, ballistic ballet to Face Off, proving that gunplay could be as expressive as grand opera. Jet Li arrived in Lethal Weapon 4 as a terrifying force of pure kinetic economy, moving so fast the cameras literally had to adjust their frame rates to capture him. Decades later, he was reduced to a legacy cameo, cashing a social security check alongside the Expendables. But Jet Li represented the pinnacle of physical discipline. Then came 1999, 2000, The Matrix, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They grossed hundreds of millions of dollars, and Hollywood executives did what they always do. They misdiagnosed the symptom as the cure. They saw wire fu, slow motion, floaty elegance, but they completely bypassed the agonising months of physical conditioning that made those styles work. Hollywood decided that instead of training actors to understand their centre of gravity, they would just strap A-listers into complex wire rigs and hoist them into the air. The result was a historical era of weightless absurdity. In Charlie's Angels or Daredevil, characters didn't feel like master martial artists, they felt like balloons drifting through a scene. Even a visionary director like Guillermo del Toro fell into the trap in Blade 2, replacing Wesley Snipes with an early digital double during some complex brawls. It was imitation without comprehension, a superficial mimicry of form that stripped away all physical consequence. And then when audiences grew tired of the floaty wire work, Hollywood didn't pivot back to authentic training, they found a solution. It was cheaper, faster, and infinitely more destructive. The shaky-cam. When Paul Greengrass directed The Bourne Supremacy and The Bourne Ultimatum, he used the restless handheld camera and rapid-fire editing to simulate the chaotic fog of espionage. It worked for Matt Damon's character, but the rest of the industry then looked at that technique and saw this golden loophole. Why spend 6 months paying for an actor to learn judo when you can shoot a fighting close-up with a shaking lens, cut every 9 frames and let an editor stitch the illusion of competence together in post-production? This trend culminated in the absolute nadir of Western action editing, Quantum of Solace, a hypercut chaotic disaster. By shrinking the average shot length to fractions of a second and obscuring spatial geography, the film completely detaches the audience from the stakes. You can't tell who is punching, who is blocking, or where the characters are standing in relation to a room. It turns action into an abstract headache. Let's go back to 2003. A film called Ong Bak got a limited theatrical release in the UK. Me and a friend had to take a bus, a train and another bus to a cinema on the bleak outskirts of a neighbouring town just to get a ticket. It was an arduous, nearly 4-hour round trip, and we didn't hesitate for a second, because even through the grainy, low-res trailers of the early internet, we recognised something that Hollywood had engineered out of existence: pure, unsimulated physical sacrifice. We sat in that theatre and our jaws hit the floor. Tony Jaa was the generational freak of nature on the poster, but the real secret of Ong Bak wasn't the individual, It was the infrastructure. It was Pana, Ritterkrai and the Muay Thai Stunt Collective. This is the fundamental structural divergence between East and West. In Asia, martial arts cinema is built on permanent, deeply insular stunt teams. They share a unified physical vocabulary and trust each other implicitly, allowing directors to shoot complex, multi-man brawls in single, unedited wide shots. It does bring us to the John Wick Exception. John Wick does feel like the only Western franchise with a pulse, and that's because Chad Stahelski and David Leitch took that exact Eastern ecosystem and built it in Hollywood via the 8711 Stunt Company. They don't operate on the standard Hollywood gig economy, with freelancers being rushed through a week of rehearsal. They operate as a permanent collective, allowing the camera to linger in wide compositions. The wide shot, the unedited shot, that's their badge of honour. It proves this work was actually done. Then we have to look at the cynical side of the craft, because you can have too much of a good thing. Money, scale and time can be the ultimate assassins of great action. This is the Gareth Evans paradox. The Raid and Raid 2 are undisputed masterpieces of modern kinetic action cinema. They achieved greatness precisely because Evans was working under severe, claustrophobic financial limitations. When you have a tiny budget, a tight shooting schedule, your restrictions force innovation. If a choreography sequence didn't work, there's no safety net. The team have to stay on the mat, bleeding and bruising, until the fight works organically in front of the lens. But then, Evans was handed the massive unmitigated budgets from Netflix and Sky for Gangs of London and the Netflix feature Havoc. Suddenly he had the greatest curse an action director can receive: post-production. When you have an infinite financial backing, you can stop solving problems on the set with human sweat, and you can start solving them in an edit suite with a digital brush. You begin using CGI to fill in the blanks, adding artificial blood splatters that lack physical weight, shrapnel, and smoothing over flawed choreography. The budget kills the very resistance that action cinema requires to feel alive. And this brings us full circle back to The Furious and why it feels like such a triumphant, defiant statement. It avoids post-production traps, it keeps its budget grounded in practical bone-crunching choreography, where physical exhaustion is used as a narrative turning point. Don't have to take my word for it. Even the guys currently steering the Hollywood superhero machine know they're being outworked. James Gunn took the cast and crew of his massive upcoming Superman sequel, Man of Tomorrow, to see The Furious, and he publicly praised Kenji Tanigaki as one of the best action filmmakers alive. When the architects of the CGI blockbusters are taking notes from martial arts film, you know the tide is turning. See, what The Furious ultimately proves is that action cinema doesn't require a green screen playground, an army of VFX artists, or a hyperactive editor trying to trick your eyes. It requires discipline, it requires style. Most importantly, it requires a unified collective of performers who are willing to step in front of a wide lens and let the cinema capture their real, unsimulated exhaustion. Action cinema isn't about the grand illusion of spectacle, it's about the hard reality of human endurance, and thank goodness, The Furious has the scars to prove it.
Would you like to know more?